When a groom invites his ex-wife to humiliate her at his wedding, he never expects her to arrive with a powerful billionaire, turning his celebration into the most shocking downfall of his life. The invitation was not a mistake. He stared at her name on the envelope for a long time before sealing it, not with hesitation, but with satisfaction. The gold letters shimmered under the chandelier light as if they were part of some grand victory announcement. He was getting married in the most luxurious hotel in the city. Crystal chandeliers. A live orchestra. Hundreds of guests. Business partners. Old friends. Even distant relatives he barely remembered. Everything was designed to impress. And in the middle of that perfect celebration, he wanted one more thing. Her. Not because he missed her. Not because he wanted closure. He wanted an audience. He leaned back in his chair, imagining her walking into the hall alone. No partner. No success story. Just memories of a failed marriage and the whispers of guests who once knew them as a couple. Would she lower her eyes? Would she pretend to smile? A slow smirk curved on his lips. She'll finally see what she lost. Their divorce had not been quiet. It had been sharp, public, humiliating, especially for her. He had moved on quickly, announcing his engagement only months later. People praised his new bride's beauty, her wealthy family, her connections. No one asked how his ex-wife was surviving. He convinced himself that inviting her was an act of maturity. "We are adults," he told a friend casually. "Why should there be bad blood?" But deep inside, the truth was darker. He needed to feel superior. He needed to see proof that he had risen while she had fallen. He imagined the moment clearly, raising a toast, thanking everyone for coming, casually acknowledging his past, perhaps even offering her a polite nod. A performance of grace that would hide the cruelty underneath. The wedding planner entered the room to confirm final details. He signed papers without looking up. "Is there anything else to add to the guest list?" she asked gently. He paused. "Yes," he replied calmly, sliding the envelope across the desk. "Make sure this one is delivered personally." There was no tremble in his voice. When the door closed behind her, silence filled the room again. For a brief second, just a second, something uncomfortable moved inside his chest. Was this really necessary? He pushed the thought away. He told himself this was justice. Closure. Balance. But deep down, it was pride dressed as celebration. Outside, preparations for the wedding continued beautifully, flowers arriving, musicians rehearsing, chefs perfecting the menu. Everything looked flawless. He believed he was orchestrating the perfect final chapter of their story. He had no idea he was writing the first line of his own humiliation. Because sometimes, when you invite someone to witness your victory, you unknowingly invite them to reveal your truth. Pride often builds the stage for its own downfall. The envelope arrived on a quiet afternoon. She almost ignored it. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind used for celebrations. Her name was written carefully in gold letters. For a moment, her fingers froze against it. She did not need to open it to know who it was from. Still, she opened it. Inside, the invitation card shimmered with luxury. A grand venue. A perfect date. 2 names printed in bold, his, and the woman he chose after her. The old version of her would have collapsed right there. The old version of her would have cried, questioned her worth, wondered why she had not been enough. But she did not cry. She read every word slowly, carefully, as if studying a contract instead of a wedding invitation. A strange calm settled in her chest. Was this meant to hurt her? Memories began to rise, sharp voices in empty rooms, long nights of silent tears, the cold way he walked away when she needed him most. She remembered the day he told her she was holding him back. She remembered signing the divorce papers with shaking hands while he avoided her eyes. 4 months after that. She had felt broken, forgotten, replaceable. But that woman was gone. She walked to the window, holding the invitation against the light. Outside, the city moved normally. Cars passed. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. Life had continued, even when she thought hers had stopped. "He still thinks I'm the same woman he left behind." A soft, almost invisible smile touched her lips. She did not feel jealousy. She did not feel anger. She felt clarity. If he truly believed she would attend and feel small, then he had not understood her at all. Not during the marriage. Not after it. She placed the card gently on the table and sat down. Instead of replaying painful arguments, she remembered something else: the nights she worked overtime to rebuild herself, the courses she took, the confidence she slowly regained. The mornings she woke up stronger than the day before. He had walked away thinking he was choosing something better. But sometimes, rejection is protection in disguise. Her phone buzzed softly beside her. She glanced at the screen, and her expression softened, not because of him, but because of the life she had quietly rebuilt. She picked up the invitation again. This time, she did not see it as an insult. She saw it as an opportunity. An opportunity to close a chapter not with tears, but with grace. An opportunity to walk into a room that once witnessed her heartbreak, and show them a woman who had healed. She placed the card back in its envelope with steady hands. No dramatic reaction. No angry message. No desperate call. Only silence. And strength. Because when a woman heals in private, her peace becomes louder than any humiliation planned against her. Sometimes the calmest reaction is the strongest revenge. The day she left the courthouse with the divorce papers in her hand, the world did not stop for her pain. Cars moved. People laughed. The sky looked the same. But inside, everything had collapsed. She went home to an apartment that felt unfamiliar and silent. Half the closet was empty. The photos were gone. Even the air felt different. That night, she sat on the floor with her back against the wall and allowed herself to cry, not because she wanted him back, but because she had to say goodbye to the life she once believed in. The next morning, reality arrived. Bills. Rent. Work. There was no wealthy family supporting her.
No dramatic rescue.
Just her reflection in the mirror, tired, swollen eyes, but still standing. She found a job that barely covered her expenses. Some co-workers whispered when they learned she was divorced. A few pitied her openly. Others judged her quietly. Marriage is hard, one woman had said with a shrug. Maybe you couldn't handle it. She smiled politely. They have no idea what I survived. At night, she studied. She enrolled in courses she had once postponed because family came first. She learned new skills. She stayed up past midnight watching tutorials, taking notes, building something invisible but powerful, herself. There were days she doubted everything. Days when loneliness felt heavier than any insult. She would sit by the window and ask herself softly, was I really not enough? But slowly that question changed. Not was I enough for him, but what do I want for myself? That shift changed everything. Months turned into a year. Her posture changed first. Then her voice. Then her standards. She began to receive better opportunities.
A promotion.
A new project. People who once ignored her now listened carefully when she spoke. Her confidence was no longer fragile, it was built on experience. She invested wisely. She saved carefully. She learned how to stand alone without fear. One evening, she walked past a restaurant she and her ex-husband used to visit. For a moment, old memories tried to pull her backward. But they no longer hurt. They felt distant, like scenes from someone else's life. He had believed she would crumble without him. He had believed she depended on his name, his status, his choices. What he never understood was that her strength had always been there, hidden beneath love, compromise, and sacrifice. When love ended, her strength finally had space to breathe. She stopped seeking validation. She stopped comparing herself to the woman he chose after her. She stopped replaying arguments in her mind. Instead, she built a version of herself that did not need anyone's approval. By the time the wedding invitation arrived, she was no longer the woman who signed those divorce papers with trembling hands. She was calm, independent, grounded, completely transformed. He thought he left her with nothing. But sometimes, losing everything is the only way to discover who you truly are. And a woman who rebuilds herself from nothing becomes unstoppable. She met him on an ordinary Tuesday. There were no dramatic collisions.
No spilled coffee. No instant fireworks.
It happened in a conference room filled with quiet tension and serious faces. She had been invited to present a proposal her team had worked on for months. The project was important, not just for her career, but for her confidence. He sat at the far end of the table. Calm. Observant. Dressed simply, but with the quiet authority of someone who did not need to prove anything. She knew his name, of course. Everyone in the business world did. A billionaire investor. A man whose decisions shaped industries. But when she began to speak, she did not focus on who he was. She focused on what she knew. Her voice was steady. Her ideas were clear. She answered difficult questions without hesitation. She did not try to impress, she simply told the truth. When the meeting ended, most people rushed out, whispering nervously about the outcome. He did not rush. He approached her slowly. "You explained that well," he said, not with charm, but with sincerity. "You believe in this project." "Yes," she replied calmly. "Because I built it." There was a brief silence, not awkward, but thoughtful. He studied her the way one studies something valuable. Not her face. Not her appearance. Her confidence. "He's looking at me like I matter." For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not as someone's ex-wife, not as a woman who had been left behind, but as an individual with strength and intelligence. Their conversations remained professional at first. Meetings turned into discussions. Discussions turned into long strategy sessions over coffee. He asked about her ideas, her goals, her vision. No one had asked her those questions before. He never mentioned her past. Never asked about her divorce. Never treated her like someone who needed saving. Instead, he respected her boundaries. One evening, after a successful presentation that secured a major investment, they stood by the office window overlooking the city lights. "You don't give up easily," he said quietly. "I learned not to," she answered. He nodded, as if understanding more than she had said. Was this how love was supposed to feel, safe, steady, without fear? He did not rush her. He did not overwhelm her with grand gestures. His kindness was subtle. His support was quiet but powerful. When rumors about their partnership began to circulate, he addressed them calmly. "She is here because she earned it," he said firmly in front of others. That moment mattered more than flowers or gifts. Slowly, something deeper began to grow between them. Not dependency. Not desperation. But trust. She realized she did not feel small around him. She did not feel pressured to prove her worth. She felt equal. And when he finally asked her to have dinner, not as colleagues, but as two people exploring something new, she did not hesitate. Because this time, she was not choosing from fear of being alone. She was choosing from strength. He did not rescue her from her past. He simply met her in her present. And sometimes, the greatest love is not the one that saves you, but the one that respects the woman you fought to become. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and flawless. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the Grand Hotel ballroom. White roses lined the aisle. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above perfectly arranged tables. A live string quartet rehearsed softly in the background. Everything looked like a dream. He stood in front of the mirror adjusting his tie, studying his reflection with quiet satisfaction. The tailored suit fit perfectly. His hair was styled with precision. Today, he believed, would mark not only a new beginning, but a public victory. Guests had already begun arriving. Laughter echoed in the hallways. Expensive perfumes filled the air. Cameras flashed near the entrance as relatives and business partners greeted one another warmly. He checked his phone. No message from her. A small smile appeared on his face. She's coming. She wouldn't miss this. He imagined her walking in alone, perhaps slightly uncomfortable under curious eyes. He imagined whispers spreading through the crowd. He imagined himself standing tall beside his new bride, confident, successful, admired. Was it cruel to want that moment? He convinced himself it wasn't. After all, he had simply sent an invitation. If she chose to attend, that was her decision. That was how he justified it in his mind. His best man entered the room, laughing loudly. "You did it," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "The biggest wedding of the year." He nodded proudly. "Yes," he replied. "Everything is perfect." Outside, the venue sparkled. Luxury cars lined the driveway. The bride's family greeted high-profile guests. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, offering champagne. The atmosphere felt powerful, controlled, carefully designed to impress. But beneath his confidence, something restless stirred. He checked the entrance from the balcony above the hall. Every time a car pulled in, his eyes focused sharply. Not because he feared she wouldn't come. Because he was waiting. Waiting for that exact moment when the past would walk through the door, and he would prove he had outgrown it. The wedding planner approached him with a gentle reminder. 10 minutes until the ceremony begins. He nodded again, straightening his jacket. Downstairs, guests began taking their seats. Soft music filled the air. Conversations lowered into elegant murmurs. No one sensed tension. No one sensed the quiet storm gathering just beyond the gates. He looked at himself one last time in the mirror. Successful. Admired. In control. He believed he had planned every detail of this day, from the flowers to the guest list. But life does not always follow the script we write for it. And sometimes, the moment you think you are about to humiliate someone, is the moment fate prepares to humble you instead. Arrogance often celebrates too early. The music softened as another car pulled up to the entrance. At first, no one paid much attention. Luxury vehicles had been arriving all afternoon. Guests in designer dresses and tailored suits stepped out one after another, smiling for cameras, adjusting their outfits before entering the glowing hall. But this car was different. It did not rush. It stopped slowly, confidently, as if it already owned the moment. The driver stepped out first. Then he walked around and opened the back door. She stepped out. Not the woman people remembered. Not the fragile ex-wife whispered about after the divorce. She wore a gown that flowed like quiet power, elegant, simple, but unforgettable. Her posture was straight. Her expression calm.
No hesitación. No nervous smile.
Only grace. The air shifted. Whispers began instantly. Is that? Yes. It's her. She actually came. Inside the hall, heads began turning toward the entrance one by one, like a wave moving across the room. And then he stepped out beside her. Tall. Composed. Effortlessly commanding attention. His presence did not need introduction. Many guests recognized him immediately, from business magazines, conferences, headlines. The billionaire. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A glass slipped slightly in someone's hand. Was she really walking in with him? She did not cling to his arm. She did not hide behind him. They walked side by side. Equal. Confident. Unbothered. Upstairs, from the balcony, the groom noticed the sudden stillness below. He frowned slightly, leaning forward to see what had caused the distraction. And then he saw her. For a moment, he did not breathe. She was not alone. She was not broken. She was radiant. His chest tightened. That's not possible. The guests who once pitied her were now watching with wide eyes. The same people who expected an awkward appearance were now witnessing something entirely different. Power. Not loud. Not aggressive. But undeniable. She stepped into the hall as if she belonged there, not as a former wife seeking closure, but as a woman who had already moved beyond it. The billionaire greeted a few familiar faces politely. His tone was calm, respectful, confident. Cameras subtly shifted direction. Attention redirected itself without permission. And she simply stood there, serene, aware of every stare, yet untouched by them. Was this the same woman he thought he would humiliate? The groom's confident smile slowly faded. The script he had imagined began to dissolve in real time. He had expected discomfort. He had expected embarrassment. Instead, she brought dignity. And power he could not compete with. As she lifted her eyes and briefly met his from across the room, there was no anger in them. Only peace. And that peace shook him more than any accusation ever could. Because the greatest shock is not when someone fights back. It is when they rise so high that your attempt to bring them down no longer matters. Never underestimate the strength of a woman who rebuilt herself in silence. The ceremony had not yet begun, but the tension in the room was already louder than the music. He felt it. The shift. The attention that was no longer fully his. Determined to regain control, he descended the staircase with a confident smile, greeting guests as if nothing had disturbed him. When he finally approached her, the crowd subtly leaned closer. This was the moment he had planned. Well, he said smoothly, loud enough for those nearby to hear, I'm surprised you actually came. His tone carried a hint of amusement. A hint of superiority. She met his eyes calmly. You sent an invitation. A few guests exchanged glances. He let out a soft laugh. I just hope this isn't uncomfortable for you. There it was. The attempt. The gentle public reminder that she was the past. For a second, silence hovered between them. He expected her voice to tremble. He expected awkwardness. Instead she smiled, not politely, not bitterly, but peacefully. Not at all, she replied. I wish you well. Her composure unsettled him, so he turned slightly, gesturing toward the man beside her. And you are? Before she could answer, the billionaire extended his hand. Daniel, he said simply, his voice steady. We've met before, at the International Investors Summit last year. The groom's expression flickered. He remembered. Of course he remembered. That summit had been exclusive. Invitations were limited to top-tier business leaders. He had attended as a rising executive, hoping to make connections. Daniel had been the keynote speaker, the man who influenced global markets with a single decision. I didn't realize you two knew each other, the groom said carefully. Daniel's tone remained calm. We've been working closely for some time. She leads one of our most promising projects. A quiet wave of shock passed through the nearby guests. She leads it, someone whispered. The groom felt heat rise to his face. Since when did she become this powerful? He forced a smile. That's impressive. Daniel looked at her briefly, pride clear in his eyes. Impressive doesn't begin to describe it. The message was subtle but sharp. She was not someone who had been left behind. She was someone who had risen. A few business partners who had been standing nearby suddenly shifted their attention toward her. One even stepped forward to congratulate her on recent achievements they had read about in the news. The groom's attempt to shrink her had backfired completely. Instead of pity, she was receiving respect. Instead of whispers about failure, there were murmurs of admiration. He cleared his throat, searching for control. Well, I'm glad everything worked out for you. She tilted her head slightly. It did.
No sarcasm. No anger.
Just truth. The music swelled softly in the background as guests continued glancing between them, the unspoken shift undeniable. He had wanted this moment to confirm his victory. Instead, it exposed his insecurity. Because humiliation only works when the other person feels small. And she did not. The tables had turned without a single raised voice. And in that crowded hall, surrounded by luxury and applause, he finally understood something painful. You cannot embarrass a woman who no longer seeks your validation. Respect is earned, but dignity is chosen. The ceremony finally began, but the atmosphere had changed. What was meant to feel romantic now felt fragile. The bride walked down the aisle, radiant and smiling, unaware of the quiet tension spreading through the guests. The groom stood at the altar, forcing confidence back onto his face. Yet his eyes kept drifting, not toward his future, but toward his past. She sat calmly in the third row beside Daniel, composed and distant, as if she were attending a formal event with no emotional attachment. The vows started. Promises of loyalty. Words about honesty. Forever. And that was when a soft murmur began near the back of the hall. Two former colleagues of the groom were whispering, not quietly enough. I heard she didn't leave him, one said under her breath. He was already seeing someone else. Yes, the other replied. Before the divorce was even finalized. The words traveled faster than the music. A relative turned. Then another. The whispers spread from row to row like wine through silk curtains. The groom noticed the shifting expressions. Confusion. Realization. Doubt. Was this really the perfect love story he had presented? His grip tightened slightly as he repeated his vows. She lowered her eyes for a moment, not in shame, but in memory. She remembered the late nights he claimed were business meetings. The unexplained absences. The sudden coldness long before the papers were signed. I protected his image even when he broke me. She had never exposed him. Never told their families the full truth. She had carried the silence alone, believing dignity was more important than revenge. But truth has a strange way of rising on its own. A business partner approached Daniel quietly during a pause in the ceremony. "I didn't realize she was the same woman," he said carefully. "If what I've heard is true, he lost more than a marriage." Daniel's expression remained neutral. Some losses are self-inflicted. The bride's smile began to falter slightly as she noticed the uneasy atmosphere. Even she had heard fragments of the whispers now. The groom tried to regain control by raising his voice slightly, emphasizing the word faithful in his vow. The irony did not go unnoticed. How could someone promise loyalty when betrayal had already shaped his past? Eyes slowly shifted. Toward her again, not with pity this time, but with understanding. The narrative he had built was cracking. He had told people she was difficult, too emotional, too demanding. But the truth unfolding in that room told a different story. Arrogance, infidelity, impatience. As the officiant declared them married, the applause sounded polite, but hollow. Because celebrations built on hidden truths never feel completely pure. She stood quietly as others clapped. There was no anger in her face, only release. She did not need to defend herself. She did not need to accuse him. The truth had spoken without her raising her voice. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge is not exposure, it is survival. Because when truth finally stands in the light, arrogance has nowhere left to hide. The reception continued, but the energy had shifted beyond repair. Laughter sounded forced. Conversations felt careful. Even the music seemed slightly out of place, too cheerful for the tension hanging in the air. He stood among his guests, smiling when required, shaking hands when necessary. But inside, something was collapsing. Across the hall, she stood beside Daniel, calm and untouched by the storm. A few influential guests approached her, congratulating her on recent achievements. One mentioned an article praising her leadership. Another asked about future collaborations. She responded with grace. Not once did she look around to see if he was watching. That silence hurt him more than any insult could. How did she become someone I no longer recognize? The question echoed inside him. He remembered the woman who once waited for him to come home. The woman who believed in him before anyone else did. The woman who adjusted her dreams to fit his. And now she stood there, independent, admired, powerful, without needing him at all. Was this what he had tried to humiliate? The bride approached him, sensing his distraction. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. He nodded quickly. Of course. But his eyes betrayed him. Because for the first time, he saw the full picture. He had mistaken her kindness for weakness. He had mistaken her patience for dependence. He had mistaken his temporary success for superiority. As the evening began to wind down, she picked up her small clutch and turned toward the exit. Daniel offered his arm, not as a display of possession, but as quiet support. They walked toward the doors slowly. Conversations paused again. Not because of scandal this time, but because of respect. At the entrance, she stopped briefly. Not to look at him, but to take in the room one last time. The place where he once believed he would watch her shrink. Instead, she had stood taller than ever. He took an unconscious step forward, as if wanting to say something. To apologize. To rewind time. But pride had stolen too many chances already. The doors opened. Cool night air flowed inside. She stepped out into it without hesitation. Without regret. Without anger. The car door closed gently behind her, and within seconds, the vehicle disappeared down the illuminated driveway. He remained standing there, surrounded by guests, music, and decorations that suddenly felt meaningless. Because victory without integrity is empty. And in trying to prove he had won, he had revealed exactly what he had lost. Sometimes the greatest regret comes not from being left, but from realizing you let go of the one person who would have stood beside you forever. Pride can cost you the very love that once made you strong.